Now, obviously, um, the the golden age of the Islamic world is a vast topic, which I probably won't be able to cover a lot of the specifics and a lot of the exact things or main events that happened. Because there's several main events that happened during this time, but I would be highlighting some of the main events that I found interesting or that I found that was deemed to talk about. Sorry for my mispronunciation of any of the names or words that are in Arab because I'm not an Arab speaking person. I'll be very so I'm not an Arab speaking person. So when I do pronounce them, I do sound a little funny. Sorry about that. Nothing we can do. Hello. So my name is Jordan, and today I'll be discussing about the a golden age of Islam or the Islamic world. I'll be talking about its main characteristics, when and how it was created, about the caliphites, about the impact on history, about its advancements in medicines, the main events that happened in the golden age of Islam, and like talking about them in chronological order. So yeah, I'll be discussing about that today. And so a lot of people, historians, say that it occurred in the. A lot of people say that the golden age of Islam started around 786 BC to 809 CE. Sorry, and people say that it ended around the 13th century. However, its end is debated at times. So, the term caliphate term refers to a political and religious system of governance in the Islamic world, which is also led by a caliph, seen as a successor of Muhammad, a person who was spiritually and worldly leader of the Islamic community. That's who a caliph was in a caliphate, and the caliphate specifically that is known for around the golden age of the Islamic world, where there was like key intellectual and cultural development in that part and that influenced the rest of the world, including Western Europe and Asia, such as like China and India. And the main one, sorry for my mispronouncing nation, is the Abbasid Caliphate. Is This is the Caliphate is often considered the height of the Islamic intelligence and cultural achievement. It lasts from around 750 to 1258, which is around the same time the Golden Age occurred. And some of the main characteristics that I will be discussing are the vast trade networks, the preservation of knowledge through translation from ancient Greek to Arab, or from Persian and Indian to Arab Hindu. Its intellectual flourishment during this era, the political stability during this era, cultural development during this era. So starting with vast trade networks, there were multiple trade networks, including the Silk Road, the Sub-Saharan trade route, the Indian trade route, and some of these trade routes are even still used today for trading and imports and exports from different countries. Because of the trade routes as well, many cities and urban areas flourished, such as Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and Cordoba. Trans-Saharan trade route, the Indian Ocean trade route, and the Silk Road trade. The Silk Road are the routes that were used during this time period. They helped link the Islamic world with the rest of the world. So it helped spread things such as math, ideas, and technology during this time. It helped shape the medieval world or era, which is what this time period which is what the Abbasid Caliphate was around during this time period. And this period also shaped the groundwork for many modern systems, such as in commerce, banking, science, and trade. some of the things and goods that they traded were paper, the ideas of such as Arab numbers and Indian numerals, gunpowder, mathematics, and astronomy. The Indians and Greeks, the Arab translated a bunch of texts from the Indians and Greeks and mathematics, and this era of translation was called the translation movement. And this movement basically translated Persian, Indian, and Greek texts and philosophy, such as like people like Aristotle and Ptolemy, even including Galileo as well. They and many more other important figures in the Greek era, ancient Greek era, and they translated these texts to Arab, which later helped with the reawakening of knowledge or as we so call it, the Renaissance in Europe, when that occurred, because we were able to translate the Arabic texts that were translated from Greek to Latin, so the people at the time during the Renaissance could be able to read and understand the knowledge, which they wouldn't have if it wasn't for the Islamic translators during this era of the Golden Age. But enough of that rant. They also traded goods like textiles, spices, precious metals, and paper. We also be going more in depth of the translation movement soon, but I just wanted to give that just because another main characteristic is the intellectual flourishment at the time. There was a bunch of advancements in algebra, geometry, and the zeros to decimal system. Sorry for the mispronunciation. Al-Khwarizmi, known as the father of algebra, was a respected scholar in the House of Wisdom, and he published a compendium book of calculating by rejoining and balancing. The book had linear, quadratic functions and simplifying equations. The book had a ton of. This is where the term algebra was derived from. The book had a ton of information of mathematics during this time. And it was extremely revolutionary as well, and had a lasting history in mathematics. In the book of chapters in Hindu arithmetics, the decimal point was found first presented. Al-Khwarizmi was an Arab mathematician who used a slanted dash as a decimal point. Another important contribution was the introduction of the Hindu-Arab numeral system. The system includes 0 as a placeholder and digits from 1 to 9, far better than the Roman numeral system at the time, which far better as in like it helped with just like adding, subtracting, multiplying, division, doing like multi-step equations and problem solving. The Roman numerals weren't so good at that, but with the Hindi/Arabic numerals, it helped significantly with that problem, with that issue. There were also advancements in medicine, not just in algebra and geometry. Razi was a great physician during this time, and he was the first to classify minerals into 6 different categories. He also discovered chemicals such as alcohol and kerosene. He was one of the most influential, and he wrote a book called Katib al-Manzuri, which is considered to be one of the most influential medical books during this medieval era, as well as al-Zarawi, known as the father of modern surgery, was a renowned surgeon during the Middle Ages. And his book Katib al-Tasarruf is a 30-volume medical encyclopedia based on the operations he performed. He was the first to describe abnormal pregnancies and hemophilia, which is a genetic disorder impairing the body's ability to form blood clots. He introduced over 200 surgery instruments that helped shape the tools used today for surgery. There are many more other examples of mathematicians and surgeons, no, not surgeons, mathematicians and medical geniuses during this era. I'll describe later towards the end, but for now, these are sufficient. So now we talk about the translation movement, which I was discussing earlier, a little bit earlier. I'll be reiterating some of the things I said. So, it is a translation of Greek, Persian, Indian sources into Arab that made the Islamic world become the center for knowledge during this time period. In medieval, or as we the time period, medieval times, it helped conserve classical knowledge and led a key part in Renaissance and intellectual awakening in Europe. Al-Kindi, who was a multilingual scholar, supervised the translation of Greek texts of Ptolemy and Aristotle. His translations played a key role in introducing Indian numerals in the Islamic world and the Arab world, and as well as Western Europe. Al-Fazari is a translator who translated many Indian texts into Arab, specifically texts in astronomy and mathematics. There are many other people who helped with the translation of texts. This helped tremendously with the Renaissance as well. So another main characteristic was politically stable, and this is because of the Abbasid Caliphate had a strong centralized administration. One of the main reasons for its political stability was their establishment of a highly efficient and centralized bureaucratic system. They inherited and structured the previous from They inherited and restructured the administrative process of the previous caliphate, and they introduced reforms to ensure a more inclusive government. They also created a network of governors known as walis, who helped manage various parts of this empire. And also, one of the main reasons of this political stability was its strategic location or relocation of the capital, which switched to Baghdad at a strategic location near the Tigris River. And its key trade routes also allowed for the Abbasids to control and profit from the extensive trade networks stretching from Europe to India. Unlike the previous caliphates, who were often seen as the Arab-centric, the Abbasids promote great ethnic inclusivity. So they were very kind to people who weren't part of the Islamic religion, such as Christians, Jews. They let them live freely. By doing this, they helped ensure loyalty in their vast empire, because the people knew that they weren't gonna attack them and cause harm to the people like Christians and Jews. Knew that they weren't gonna just be randomly attacked by them as long as they were peaceful. This helped to reduce internal divisions greatly. There was also great economic prosperity during this era. They helped prosper a vibrant economy. The agriculture base was strong. And cities like I said earlier, Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo became major commercial centers due to their strategic locations, like them being connected to trade routes. And the Abbasids introduced policies that encouraged the growth of urban cities, centers, markets, and infrastructure. The flourish of trade and culture helped sustain the empires economically, ensuring stability. Talked about its main characteristics. So now we'll be discussing its impact on history. So I will discuss a little bit about the algebra and geometry that happened. During the golden age of Islam, there was many things that helped impact that occurred that helped impact mathematics, science, and medicine. As we know, the two people that were discussed helped with mathematics a ton. Another person who helped revolutionize medicine was scholar named, or a physician and philosopher named Ibn. Another person who helped revolutionize medicine was a physician and philosopher named Ibn Sina. Family is known as Avicenna in the West. He was a hafidh of the Quran and an eminent physician, philosopher. He was named a master wise man by students and followers. He wrote the canon of medicine as well as over 450 books of his own. But specifically, the canon of medicine was translated in Latin during the 12th century and was used as a medical text for around 6 centuries. Mariam Astrabi, also known as a female astronomer in ancient Islam, is known for astronomical computer for solving. It's known in ancient times as someone who solved problems relating to the time and position of the sun and stars. She was required to work with complex mathematics, calculations, precisions, and gradually mastered the designs. She also helped navigate and time. She also helped with navigating and timekeeping techniques. Another brilliant genius who helped impact history was Al-Jazari, scholar, inventor, mechanical engineer. He documented about 50 medical inventions and is considered to be the father of modern-day engineering. He also invented one of the mechanical clocks driven by water and weights. One of the first mechanical clocks. Some of the main events in the Golden Age of Islam. So the Abbasid Caliphate took over the Caliphate and marked the beginning of the Golden Age, starting in 750 CE. In 762 CE, Baghdad was founded and it became the capital, intellectual, and cultural center of the Islamic world. During the 8th and 9th century was when the translation movement occurred. During the 9th century was when the House of Wisdom came about in Baghdad, which became the center of translation and research movement. In the House of Translation, there were many intellectuals and scholars who came about as well, such as people who were discussed earlier. During the 9th and 10th century was when one of the mathematical achievements was when during the 9th and 10th century a lot of the most mathematical achievements occurred. 1000 CE was the completion of Ibn Sina's canon of medicine. This medical encyclopedia became the standard reference in Europe and the Islamic world. 1055 CE, the Turks take over control of Baghdad, and they become the military rulers of the Abbasid Caliphate. So sadly, the Abbasid Caliphate began to decline by the early 13th century. That's when it started to decline tremendously, but it had already been declining for several centuries before. The caliphs in Baghdad had lost much of their political and military power. Military power was lost to the Turks, and the caliphate were essentially a shell of its former glory. The caliphs had become very symbolic rulers, while actual power was held by local dynasties and military commanders. So this is where a lot of historians claim that the Abbasid Caliphate ended was through the Mongol rise, the Mongol Empire, under the leadership of Genghis Khan and his successors began a series of rapid conquests across Asia. After Genghis Khan's death, the Mongols continued to expand under his descendants. And by the 1250s, the Abbasid Caliphate of Baghdad was weakened, divided by internal strife, and the Turks had taken control of much of the region. Abbasid caliphs were primarily ceremonial figures with limited military capabilities. And in 1258, the campaign led by Hulagu Khan's siege of Baghdad, which happened in 1258, ultimately led to the fall of Abbasid Caliph. They underestimated the Mongol threat and failed to mount a serious defense. And once the Mongols entered the city, they engaged in widespread destruction. Mongols killed a large portion of the population, including civilians and soldiers, and they destroyed libraries, schools, and cultural institutions of Baghdad, including the famous House of Wisdom, which housed vast amounts of knowledge in fields like astronomy, medicine, and mathematics. Priceless manuscripts and texts were lost. This marked the end of the golden age of the Islamic world, sadly. To conclude, the golden age of Islam spread roughly around the same centuries as the Abbasid Caliphate. Caliphate. It was a time when the Islamic civilization became a beacon of knowledge, innovation, and achievement. It had a vast array of cultures and traditions, not just in the Middle East, but in North Africa, Central Asia, and beyond. It helped with tremendously with trade routes such as the Silk Road, the Sub-Saharan trade route, and the Trans-Sub-Saharan trade route, and the Indian trade route. Over the time of groundbreaking contributions in fields as mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, engineering. We discussed some of the people who were involved in these achievements and contributions. We couldn't get to all of them, sadly, because there are a ton of people who made contributions during this time, and if we were to discuss all of them, it would take several hours. At its peak, the Islamic world was a vibrant and diverse hub of intellectual exchange, and key concepts like algebra, scientific method, and hospital systems that were made during this time. It was not just defined, this era was not only just defined by intellectual achievements, it was also art, architecture, and literature. That were also achievements that were also made during this time. The reason why I didn't discuss too much about art and architecture is because I just simply don't. First of all, a live stream would be like 3 hours long, and I just didn't find these topics to be of much importance. And the Golden Age began to decline by the 13th century through Mongol expansion and invasion. And by 1258, the city of Baghdad was ransacked and captured, and many people were killed. And many places just has the House of Wisdom, which was an intellectual and hub at its time, was burned, marking the end of the golden age of Islam. Its legacy is still seen to this day, and its impact on history is great, impacting greatly the Renaissance and fields in mathematics and medicine and astronomy. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that you were able to learn something about the golden age of Islam. And thank you for tuning in.